We have some shortcomings. And Mr. Speaker, let me tell you, for far too long, the Bahamian people have been denigrated by all and sundry about our work ethic. Mr. Speaker, while it may be true for some of us, no doubt it is not true for the majority of us. Mr. Speaker, as I said on a previous occasion in this place, one need only look around us at the 21 to 22. I get confused sometimes. Some people say it's 21, some people say it's 22. 21 to 22 inhabited islands of this beautiful Bahama land. Look at the development of the roads, the infrastructure, replicated 20 times over, Mr. Speaker. We're not lazy people, Mr. Speaker.
No.
We're not lazy. Look at our family islands, Mr. Speaker. How we could talk about being lazy? We're not lazy. That's something that some people put out there who, for whatever reason, to serve their own interests, they put it out there. And you know what, Mr. Speaker? We fly with it. We flew with it. It's coming out of our mouths now, just like the member for East Grand Bahama. It's coming out of our mouths now. You know what I mean? Mr. Speaker, look at the fact that we have managed to create economies in each of our family islands. No, all is not perfect, Mr. Speaker. We're developing.
It's a young nation.
We're 40 years old, Mr. Speaker. 40 years old. We're developing. But we have economies on our family islands. And those are family, we're looking to grow those economies, Mr. Speaker. You hear about the Bimini, what's happening in Bimini, Mr. Speaker? That's growing the economy in the family islands. Look what's going to be happening in Eleuthera. What's going to be happening in Andres, Mr. Speaker, when we put those farms in place? And we put a sustainable program in place tied to the College of Bahamas. In fact, our University of the Bahamas.
It's happening.
Mr. Speaker, that's plenty to be proud about. Why are we denigrating ourselves? Why are we continuing to do it? Why are we allowing our children to hear us browbeat ourselves?
Because that's all they do on the next side.
Mr. Speaker, look at the fact that we have managed to maintain a pristine environment in many of our islands. Look at the fact that we have a democracy that works in a peaceful, non-violent manner. Mr. Speaker, look at the fact that we have a thriving tourist economy. Thriving tourist economy. There ain't no dumb people here. Best in the region, Mr. Speaker. The rest of them emulating us. How we get dumb?
Speak, Hope.
Mr. Speaker, we have financial services.
Speak.
And let me tell you, the member for Elizabeth and financial services, I believe if you look in the dictionary, you can find them side by side. That young man knows financial services. Mr. Speaker, we have a multi-million-dollar fishery export sector. How we get dumb? Mr. Speaker, while crime still remains a challenge to us, we are working and we are seeing positive results. And you know what, Mr. Speaker? They could cry for that as much as they like. Those are the facts.
Facts are the facts.
It's at an acceptable level. But the fact is, we're working on it, and day by day, incrementally, if you manage to bring it down. That's one less person whose life was lost. Why are they unhappy about that? I don't understand why they're so unhappy about it. Even to the point where they are undermining the authority of the Commissioner of Police.
My gracious.
I'm talking about the figures they ain't right that he presented. It's a disgrace, Mr. Speaker. Why would the Commissioner of Police form our statistics?
Disgrace.
Why would he do that, Mr. Speaker? But again, it's part of this whole concept of us denigrating ourselves. But we can't see no good in nothing what the rest of us do. There's something wrong with that psychology, Mr. Speaker.
Speak, Seabreeze, speak. Speak, Seabreeze.
Mr. Speaker, the bottom line is that we are an accomplished people. However, Mr. Speaker, there is much work to be done 40 years after independence. Yes, Mr. Speaker, more training of our workforce is required if we are to meet the challenge of an expanding world economy, where much of what we are selling as a nation is being sold many other places. Mr. Speaker, we ask ourselves, why should a visitor choose our ascendancy over the ascendancy of the other Caribbean islands, or over the ascendancy of Hawaii or Fiji? Mr. Speaker, the difference is service. The welcome smile of our people, and the relative safety of our shores, Mr. Speaker. That's fine. You can get sunshine and sea and all that stuff, so many other places in the world. But there has to be a reason why we are number one in the Caribbean. There has to be. So what we can do, we can continue to denigrate ourselves and say we ain't good for nothing. And we number one? Why are we doing that?
Smile and laugh for it.
Why are we doing that, Mr. Speaker?
Great. Be ashamed. Just great.
Mr. Speaker, we must now adopt a program on a sustained basis where we celebrate all of the good in our people.
That's it.
We are all consumed with this negativity of what is happening in our country.
Lift our people up.
And we are mentally engineering our people, particularly our young people, to believe that they are unworthy and undeserving of actively participating in our economy.
Sea breeze. Oh, sea breeze.
Mr. Speaker, we are actually reveling in negativity. And that is demonstrated every day through the media.
Yeah.
That's all you could hear. Mr. Speaker, it is sickening. That's all you see. Just about every newspaper you open up, all you could see, and some of it, you know, you could come in this place and you could talk about all of the positive things, all of the wonderful things that we are trying to do and doing as a government to try to uplift our people and to empower our people. But none of that is focused on, you know. The only thing we hear about is who murder who rape who, all on the front page. And these things viral, going through the world. Killing ourselves, Mr. Speaker. Destroying ourselves. Destroying our children's heritage, Mr. Speaker. That's what we're doing. But you know what? It's all politics. It's politics. That's what it's all about.
Unfortunately, that's what it is.
Politics. We're destroying ourselves over politics. It's politics what have the opposition today, Mr. Speaker, against this bill.
That's right.
It's politics. That's all it is, you know. They know within themselves that this is a good bill. They know this can help our people. But before they agree, they prefer to stand over there and find all kinds of fault with it.
Talk nonsense.
Mr. Speaker, what could be wrong with the National Training Agency?
Talk nonsense.
I can't wrap my mind around the fact that they actually opposing it. I cannot wrap my mind around that.
Speak, please.
But Mr. Speaker, we are not a perfect people. But when I think about the many families who struggle to put their children through private schools, spending thousands of dollars each year through great sacrifice, when I think about the many single parents, Mr. Speaker, who defy all the odds to educate and to uplift their children and to create an avenue out of poverty for them, I refuse, Mr. Speaker, to discourage them and their efforts by dismissing them and their children and telling them they need not apply, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
I'm not going to do it. And I'm not going to encourage anybody to do it. And I will fight against anybody who continue to do it.
That's right. I need Grand Bahama and his folks.
Mr. Speaker, where they are not qualified for jobs, we have to get our people qualified. This is a national responsibility, which this government recognizes and is determined to fulfill. Mr. Speaker, having a job, you know, is a privilege. It is an indication that someone has faith in you, to entrust you with some part of their livelihood or their business. And there is a need, Mr. Speaker, to sensitize our people about this responsibility, especially our young people who are new to the job market or who are about to enter the job market. The National Training Agency, Mr. Speaker, I feel will do this. And our young people, Mr. Speaker, must be educated from adolescence about the importance of staying out of trouble and maintaining a clean police record, Mr. Speaker. Criminal actions, no matter how minor or seemingly insignificant, are a hindrance to obtaining gainful employment. Mr. Speaker, I just want to digress here for a little. I had the most surreal experience the other day. I was at my headquarters having office hours. And in walked a tall, strapping young man, good looking, well clean and properly dressed. And he sat before me and immediately he started to speak to let me know who he came for. And he indicated that he needed a job. And initially he was kind of aggressive, you know, and so I sort of let him talk and got it out of his system. And in talking to him, he disclosed to me that he was one of those convicts from the United States who had had been deported from the United States. He had a criminal record for trafficking drugs. Spent 10 years in the United States, 5 years in prison over here. And now he was looking for a job. And so we got to talking, and I'm like, so, you know, what kind of job do you think, what kind of job are you looking for? And then, you know, he indicated to me what sort of job he was looking for. And, you know, one of the jobs that he said that he thought that he might be able to get was a security job. And I said to him, but, you know, it's highly unlikely that you'll be able to get a security job because of the fact that you have a criminal record. Okay? So then we started to think, and I said, you know, so what other kind of job do you think you could do? And he really couldn't come up with another job that would not entail, you know, people sort of looking into his job experience and his lifestyle and all those things and revealing that he had a criminal record. And so, Mr. Speaker, what I have to say is that, you know, what job is that sort of person going to be able to get? Probably untrained because, you know, he went to jail right after out of high school. He's probably had very little training. And so it really, to me, presented a dilemma. And it brought home to me, Mr. Speaker, about what we can do for this segment of our society, which is a growing number of people who have, for whatever reason, had spent time in jail or in prison, have served, you know, their time, and are now are living among us in society. And many of them have decided that they want, you know, they've turned over a new leaf, and they really want to try to be contributing members of society. Yeah. And so for us, we have to now, you know, as we move on in our term of governance, this is going to have to be something that we really sit down and think about, because the numbers of those persons are increasing. But that is why I said it's important for us to teach our children at the age where they can understand from perhaps adolescence, you know, what the effects of a criminal lifestyle can really cause us in the long run, you know. And so, Mr. Speaker, part of what we do as parents and as educators in our schools and as community and civic organizations and as churches is that we have to get that message out to our young people. You know, that this criminal activity, no matter how minor it may be in our lives, will really cause us, you know, our future. There's some serious consequences. So, Mr. Speaker, if we are really going to be receiving so many of these people back into our country, and they'll be living among us, we will have to figure out how we will integrate them back into our society where they can turn their lives around to become meaningful and productive citizens. Mr. Speaker, I have often been asked to write references.
The member for Long Island rose on the point of order. The chair recognizes the member for Long Island.
Thank you very much. I just thought to share with this House for the benefit of those on the governing side. When the program was implemented of repatriation of...
This is a point of order, Mr. Speaker.
The members are just, the chair wants to hear the member's intervention.
When the program first started, we had, I'm just sharing with the benefit, for her benefit, we had implemented a program with the IMO where we actually had a training component for the reintegration of these individuals. And the headquarters was actually on Dowswell Street. And many of the persons that we had come in during that period did get their training and actually went on to become entrepreneurs, or they were advised by employers, their past, and they were placed. So I just want to share with them that there was a program in place that they might consider continuing with.
As a point of information. Yes. Thank you, Honourable Member.
I will. Yes.
Thank you,
yes,
Member.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Member for Subish, you may continue.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, well, obviously that is something that we would have to probably look at in terms of, you know, how we can assist them. But I think it's a matter which is going to become very relevant to us. And I know that this proactive government will look at it at some point in time and try to see how we can best assist that program. Mr. Speaker, I have often been asked to write references for persons who are seeking employment. I try to confine this to persons who I truly know and whose character I can vouch for. When called upon to write such references, I try to give a true evaluation of the person's character as I have experienced it. And I often find myself using the words disciplined, focused, integrity, honesty, phrases like ability to adapt and multitask, ability to think independently, to be creative and resourceful. These are some of the characteristics that every employer hopes would be reposed in those they hire. These go along with the educational achievements and other accomplishments and achievements. One of the fundamental requirements for employers, and especially those who are looking for persons with technical or special skills, is experience. So often a job ad would ask for so many years experience or training and would say that the salary is commensurate with experience. I think this is where the difference between a BTVI, which a member from Marathon says is a tertiary level institution, and this national training agency is, that's where the difference is. This agency will not only assist in persons obtaining tertiary level education, but it also allows for persons to obtain on-the-job work experience, which gives them a distinct advantage in the job market. And Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to be a part of this government's establishment of this national training agency, which is the hallmark for all visionary governments to empower their workforce. A national training agency, you heard Dr. Darwell talk about the fact that this is national training agency is something that has been established in most of our Caribbean islands as a necessary part of the infrastructure of their governments. And so here it is, we have the vision and the foresight of this government, our Prime Minister, the Minister of Labor, to ensure that the Bahamas isn't left behind. And we want, Mr. Speaker, that we know that this will empower our workforce to meet the demands of the employment sector. Mr. Speaker, I encourage all persons in the Seabreeze constituency who heretofore have not been able to obtain gainful employment in recent times to register with the agency. As the member for Golden Gates indicated, applications should be out 1 week after the 15th of July launch. And so I'm admonishing my constituents to take advantage of this great offer for training, and that is going to lead to a bright future for many of them and many of the people in our country, Mr. Speaker. And as we move forward, the PLP, this PLP government, Mr. Speaker, we can remain focused. We're going to get that opposition. That's expected. We can get the bad press. That's our life, Mr. Speaker. We can get the bad press.
Never used to that.
No matter what we do, no matter how much good we do in this country, Mr. Speaker, we can get that bad press. Mr. Speaker, but you know what? We're not going to let that deter us.
No.
We can move on. We can look forward. We can look forward, upward and onward, Mr. Speaker. And we can do it together, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
And we, Mr. Speaker, are going to succeed for the Bahamian people. We're going to empower them. We can make sure that they are trained for the opportunities that they have that is upcoming in this country, Mr. Speaker. And then when the time comes, Mr. Speaker, the 2017, they're going to know what we did for them.
Yeah.
And it ain't going to be based on those 52 weeks either.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, Seabreeze supports this legislation.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Carmichael.
Thank you. It's okay.
The member yields. The Chair recognizes Honourable Member for Bain and Grandstown.
Move the following resolution. Resolved that the business of justice continue beyond 7 p.m. on Wednesday, 26th June, 2015.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded that the business of this House extend beyond 7 p.m. this evening on the 26th of June, 2013. As many in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The resolution is agreed that the business of this House extend beyond 7 p.m. this evening. As many, the Chair now recognizes the Honourable Member for Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Please allow me to attach myself to the words of the member for Seabreeze. A most poignant and impassioned presentation yet. And as she is, one of the foundations of the three things that will last until the end of time, faith, hope, and love, we know that there's a hell of a lot more to come. I rise to give my voice on behalf of the people of Carmichael to this bill put forward by the member for Golden Gates and the Minister of Labor, as this is one of the most important pieces of legislation that we will see passed in this House this year. I also rise on behalf of another constituency of the Bahamas that I represent, which is a group of people who call themselves young. We call them youth. They call all sorts of things, but they are our future. I also wish to speak to another young person who is today celebrating a birthday, and that is Dame Marguerite Pendling, who is, it's her birthday today, so I want to tell her happy birthday. God bless you, we love you. And so now I should be in good shape. I don't want to leave without saying that. No? No rice for you. But she has been a pillar of strength, one of my good supporters, mentors, has kind of taken over from where my mother, who has passed away, left off, gives sage advice, and we know her contribution during our campaign was stellar. And so we want to let her know that we hold her in high esteem and in our prayers. There is a group of people, Mr. Speaker, who are paying attention to this bridge idea that we're doing. The opportunities that we've had in the past, where we are now, and where we can go in the future. And I think what this bill speaks to is securing the future. It is consistent with what we presented in our budget contribution. In order to secure the future for this next generation of Bahamians, this has to be done, and it has to be done now. 4,000 kids just came out of high school. Yet they're looking for something to do. Thousands of people are looking for jobs, but we know there is a gap in between their preparation and being engaged. And this seeks to address that gap. All that the Minister of Labor is trying to do here, along with his fantastic staff, we've done a gap analysis. We know what the problems are. People don't have the problems no more. Fix it. This seeks to fix this gap. It is going to bridge the gap. All this 40th year of independence, everything that you're seeing we're doing bridges gaps. And it's simple what happens when you bridge a gap. For the public out there who may not know, before that place across the street where Atlantis is now had its present name, it was called Hog Island. Hog Island. Not really a kind of place you'd want to go. Particularly not for vacation. Yeah? Although I could think of some people who mightn't mind. Let me stay on track. You put a bridge to it. Just a bridge, a simple connection. You bridge this gap where people couldn't get to their goal. That's all it is. You bridge a gap where people wanted to go somewhere and they now could go instead of swimming over or going by dinghy. They could drive over, they could walk over. You get access now to this place and it becomes Paradise Island. That's all this does. It bridges the gap for people who have no chance of getting access to these levels of training and these skills, exposure to people that they would never meet in their lives. And Agatha Marcel, who has an international reputation, we have chosen to use because she brings with her the wealth of knowledge, expertise, and passion about it, that she will give that to these children. She is infectious. They're going to receive some of this information and passion she has, and they're going to see their future before them, bridging this gap. And when she's finished with them, they're going to feel like, hey, I could walk across to Paradise Island. I could go over there for dinner. I belong. People just want to belong. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the greatest thing of human beings, a sense of belonging. And either we can let them belong to us, or I know some fellas out there, they want them to belong to them. Make up your mind. Choose ye who ye will serve. And you cannot serve two masters. It'll kill you. Dead. I'm very pleased because I have another group of young people, this junior CAC team who is actually at my ministry waiting. So I'm going to beg your indulgence and be very short today. But a group of young people, again, who are going out into the world. Most of them have never been to a major event, and they are launching out into the world. We saw this weekend in Grand Bahama, where the young Anthony Strawn, who is the #1 female athlete of her class in the world, ran the second fastest time in the 200 in the world this year. 22.6. And Cruz, she wasn't struggling. Right behind her, about the fourth fastest time, is Shawnee Miller, 22.3. Cruising, didn't push hard at all, 22.3. Right behind her, Shawnee Miller. I think Shawnee run the 22.6. And Shawnee really, her mastery is the 400. And so, for young people, we're going to launch, along with the opening of the National Training Agency, something called Go for the Gold. Go for the Gold. And this will last until we go to the Olympics, and we're going to carry that with all our teams as they move around the world and let them know that there's something about Bahamians. There's something about the spirit of these people that is always striving for excellence. And that's all we're trying to impart to our young people. Give them a chance, show them what to do, and they can do it. What this seeks to do, and Minister for Labor, I applaud you publicly, because some people will give a man a fish and he'll eat for a day. And other people will seek to take him fishing, and it may take a while. It may not be easy. He might get cut up, you'll get burned up, you might even get bitten. But once he learns to fish, he could eat for the rest of his life and feed his family. And the simple difference between the intent of a 52-week job grab or a training program is just that. You want to eat or you want to live. You could eat today, you know, but tomorrow you could be gone. You could be gone. Mr. Speaker, the Greeks have a wonderful phrase called nam ipsi sciente pa. Right? Nam ipsi sciente pa. It means knowledge is power. And the greatest knowledge you could have is knowledge of self. And I feel that in attaching this to young people, Ms. Marcel, it'll give them a knowledge of self that just tells them, you could do this because we believe you could do it. That's all. We campaign on this idea, believe in Bahamians. Right? The Minister of Labor now wishes to demonstrate the idea that we said, this is now walking the walk. To demonstrate the idea, we believe in you, and so instead of just talking about it, we're going to show you. We're going to engage you. And this is an employment and training agency. It bridges a gap in between school and real work. It's a bridge. That's all it is, a bridge. And you cannot, now that we have come up with our 40th anniversary of independence, told people this is about the bridge. We're taking you somewhere. The captain got the thing. We pointed in the right direction. The people believe in. They voted on it. And now again we hear, well, not now. It's too soon. It might cost too much. I keep telling some members here, if you think education and training is expensive, try ignorance and unemployment. Try it. Try it. It is simple. We believe in these young people, and I applaud all of those who are demonstrating our belief in these young people. I am so proud to be associated with this agency. I think training is the way to go. Yep. This agency, and I will say to you, Ms. Marcel, publicly, you know, when I get a couple hours off or a couple days off, I'm going to go down to the agency myself. You know, I'm the product of an educator, E.P. Roberts, who was my first mentor. Went to Tuskegee in 1928, studied physics, came back to the Bahamas. They tell him, you're too educated. No way you could go into the public system here. He hopped on a little dinghy. He used to sail it himself. went to Andros, went to Abaco, went to Eleuthera by himself in the night, and said, I will go around the Bahamas and teach every child I know. That's how he got started. And he taught many of the people in here, the original Skibo Roberts. Yep. He is the one who tells me, well, you could do anything you want to do. Technical, and this is a man who could have been anything he wanted to be. He could have stayed in the United States and he would have been a professor of physics, man, in the 1920s. He said he would come back to Nassau, and because the establishment at the time would not let him become a major force in teaching in the country, he said, no problem, well, anything you would let me teach. You know what he decided to teach? Not how to teach, decided to teach. Technical drawing. He opened the technical training school right there. In fact, the building is still there through Oaksfield, I'm right beside the UE residences. The building's still right there. Tiny little building. And he decided he would get young men in particular. And in the midst of teaching them to build a desk, or to try a boat, or to do a sign, or to do something else, he will teach them everything about life. And there are men in this room right now who went through his training. The apprenticeship program, I applaud members opposite for that program. The apprenticeship is a great part of training. All we're doing is building on what is already here, though. It's not taking away from anybody. You're building on what you have. But this is the right way to go. Everybody sitting in this house today is the product of people like Skibo Roberts. It is because of them that we stand here. And we stand proud to know where we came from was boat builders, carpenters, masons, teachers, whatever, to do the things we can today. And we also have to make sure that these young men coming into the system know that the men that I respected, that's who they were. That's who they were. The farmers, boat builders, carpenters, masons. In those days, they tell a young man, boy, you need a trade. Don't get married until you get a trade. When you get a trade, then you build yourself a house. You know why? Because you could build one yourself. Doesn't have no mortgage. They had a house. What we got now is noose and chain around your neck. Ain't no house. There's a ball and chain. People don't have a house now. And then they just take the chain and yank it. That's not a house. A house, something you go feel comfortable in the evening. Yeah, the back porch ain't fixed yet, but that's fine. You call your friends next week, say, man, y'all come over here, bring some chicken. I got a case of beer, we can knock out this porch. And y'all do it yourself. That's a house. We don't have houses now. Certainly not homes. And this seeks to bridge that gap. All they're doing is bridging a gap. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to go on any longer because the whip let me squeeze into his spot. But I really just want to attach myself to the words, the spirit, idea, the ideal that this thing does. Congratulate the members who've raised it. Give my support to the agency. I will be there myself at least once a month. It is close enough to my constituency. I can be there once a month. I will go there and train some of these young men myself. That's so important. So this ain't a nebulous idea. Ms. Marcel, I tell you, I'll come there once a month. I will train some of them myself. I'll give them what Skibo gave me. And you know what that is? A chance. Right. Give them a chance. I support this bill, Mr. Speaker. I rest.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many. The Chair recognizes Honourable Member for Kalani.
No, you want to go. I yield.
The member for Kalani yield. As many. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Fort Charlotte.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Member for Kalani, for yielding. Mr. Speaker, we have had some tremendous contributions from the governing side. Very well thought out and delivered. And while I very much enjoyed listening to the most recent one, I am compelled to refer to what I thought was a very strong and hard-hitting contribution by the Honorable Member for Seabreeze. It is noteworthy, Mr. Speaker, that she didn't have to hurl her hand to make her point. She exercised her intellect and her communicative skills to get her points across, and she was extremely strong and hard-hitting in doing so. Mr. Speaker, I stand once again on behalf of the very proud people of the great constituency of Fort Charlotte. Government is charged with the responsibility for passing legislation and implementing policies that make the country stronger and its future more secure. This government has noted on many occasions that while it is important to invest in the improvement of our nation's infrastructure, we cannot achieve our desired objective of becoming a developed nation unless we place greater emphasis on the development of our human capital. Today, by most objective accounts, Mr. Speaker, although we are said to be a rich nation, the state of our human capital is poor. This is the work of leadership in the Bahamas in 2013, reducing mental poverty, spiritual poverty, and social poverty. The first is the realm of the school, family, and workplace. The second is the purview of the church, and the latter is the domain of the business community as the driver and the government as the facilitator. I wish to leave the second to be addressed by religious ministers and to direct instead my focus to the issues of mental poverty and social poverty as I speak to the legislation before us. The nonfiction book Freakonomics by Stephen D. Levitt and Stephen J. Dubner addressed the issue of mental and social poverty and their impact on the development of the African American community. A quote from the book reads as follows: "Childhood poverty and a single-parent household are among the strongest predictors that a child will have a criminal future. Growing up in a single-parent home roughly doubles a child's propensity to commit crime. So does having a teenage mother. Another study has shown that low maternal education is the single most powerful factor leading to criminality." I'm hoping that the member for Montague is listening carefully. The member for Montague said in his contribution that this bill has zero to do with dealing with the crime problem in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. It is evident that the member is totally out to lunch with respect to an understanding for what contributes to the development and onslaught of crime. The variables referred to in this book, Freakonomics, Mr. Speaker, these variables are indeed incubators for crime. The sociological text entitled "Young, Black, and Male in America, an Endangered Species" notes that, and I quote, "The black community is now reaping the bitter harvest of decades of neglect of the plight of its young people by national policies that have failed to eradicate their poverty, failed to equip them with education for an information society. The result is that young black males have become an endangered species, with more young black men added each year to the ranks of the poor, the jobless, and the homeless. And I wish to add my own to the ranks of the incarcerated. Mr. Speaker, the impact on the black family, this is the continuation of the quote, the impact on the black family, the black economy, and on individual lives has been devastating. The black family is the subject of much concern these days, especially with the rise in single female-headed households. But a major reason for the deterioration of black family stability is the deterioration of economic opportunities for black men. The rise of single female-headed families parallels the decline in the black male workforce. It takes two to form a family. And when a young man cannot get work or earn enough to support a family, fewer families are formed. Young men aged 20 to 24 who earn enough to stay above the poverty line marry at rates 3 and 4 times higher than young men with below poverty line earnings. Constricted opportunities for young men have cut their marriage rates in half over the past 15 years. End of quote. The take-home message here, Mr. Speaker, is that prioritizing policies and programs that invest in our human capital not only aids in the eradication of poverty, but in preventing the eradication of people. On this issue of sociological research, we must ask ourselves, to what extent is the College of the Bahamas functioning as a resource for scientific data to assess the performance of our society in its many sectors? We are told that the college has purposely reduced the number of contact hours between professors and students to facilitate scientific research and publication. Is this being done, Mr. Speaker? And to what degree is more funding needed? I referred to an article in the Wall Street Journal from this past weekend, and it said that the article is entitled, "Study Measures Impact of Gambling on Saving." As chairman for the Gaming Board of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, gambling is something that I have become deeply immersed in as it relates to my very young experience in politics. And so I make it a point to read as much as I can about it. And this article caught my attention because it reminded me of what I thought was an inadequacy of our recent referendum exercise, when I thought we could have had so much more information from stakeholders in our society, academicians whose job it is to provide policymakers with research to influence the policies we seek to implement and the laws we seek to enact. That information, that data was sorely lacking, Mr. Speaker. And this article from last weekend's Wall Street Journal said, and I quote, "Previous studies have found that lotteries are more popular among poor people than richer segments of society. A 2008 report by the Commission on Thrift found that households earning less than $13,000 spend about 9% of their income on lottery tickets." Do we in this country have an institution or researchers doing the work of finding out how the poor are impacted by gambling in our society to influence our policy and the legislation we seek to enact? You see, if we wish to advance as a country, and if we wish to become a country that possesses a leading tertiary institution that we will call the University of the Bahamas, our academicians must be conducting such critical research. We cannot just be relying on what's happening in other countries without having the empirical data to inform us as to what is happening in our own country. You see, Mr. Speaker, government policy and drafting of legislation must be based as much as possible on the research and analysis conducted by our foremost academicians. The National Training Agency Bill is an important piece of legislation targeted at addressing one of the most pressing concerns facing our country today, and that is youth unemployment. We are a country challenged by the impact of youth unemployment, whether it is the depopulation of our family islands by youth in search of employment elsewhere, and the devastating impact this has on the health of those island communities. I wish to pause very briefly. I will accompany the Right Honorable Member for Centerville and the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, San Salvador, and the official delegation to the opening of the Bimini Bay Resort on this coming Friday. I believe we travel to Florida to catch the ferry from Florida over to Bimini to be able to appreciate the entirety of the experience that the visitors to Bimini will receive. And I make it my point of trying to find out how these projects are impacting our people. And when we talk about depopulation of our islands, so as a result of people having to leave in order to find work, to be able to help themselves, provide for themselves, help their families, provide for their families, I found it noteworthy that 170 people are being employed by this project full-time. And I've been advised by the property managers that of that number, 38% are from the island of Grand Bahama. 38% who have had to, well, as a matter of fact, for the benefit of the press, I can enumerate those a little later, but I wanted to focus that it's almost an even distribution between Grand Bahama and New Providence, with the minority of workers being local Biminites. We must also look at the impact that unemployment has on a young person's desire to marry, or a young couple's choice to end their marriage, or the impact that unemployment has on the children of young parents and the development of those children as human beings, or the impact that youth unemployment has on society and government through an increase in idleness, single-parent families, crime, welfare assistance, crime-fighting resources, our courts, our prison, and our nation's future. Youth unemployment not only carries a cost for those without work, it leaves our country to have to bear a very expensive social and financial burden. We have been severely impacted, Mr. Speaker, by the worst economic recession since the Great Depression. This government is still battling to revive our struggling economy and battling to remove our people from the unemployment lines to the bank lines. It is a battle that is shared by much richer countries around the world. In the European Union, youth unemployment is now at 23.5%, or almost 1 in 4 young persons is without work. In Spain and Greece, the youth unemployment figures are double, at 50% youth joblessness. European Union budget cuts and austerity measures have left little money for economic stimulus or employment programs, which has only worsened the youth unemployment problems in those respective countries. At last measure, the Bahamas, a demographically young nation with far fewer resources, has a youth unemployment rate of 32%. 3 out of every 10 of our young people, or more closely, 1 out of every 3, are out of jobs. And more, as members of Parliament, we find that the best of them are quickly running out of patience, waiting on our economy to begin creating them. Youth unemployment is a very serious threat to the well-being of any country and its future. The youth of today are expected to provide skilled labor, innovation in our economy, and a supply of income earners who can contribute to the pensions of retirees by making payments into our national insurance system. In poor economies with high rates of youth unemployment, businesses have a smaller pool of skilled labor. Society produces less innovative entrepreneurs, and our Social Security Fund is challenged to meet its obligations to our nation's retirees. The European Union recognizes that their high level of youth unemployment is a matter of national security and is, and I quote, sounding the alarm on this issue. As such, they have set aside $7.8 billion for their Youth Guarantee Program in what is described as a commitment to getting every young person in the European Union into a job, an internship, or training within 4 months of their becoming unemployed, and another $22 billion in funding for youth unemployment projects. You see, Mr. Speaker, getting unemployed persons working as quickly as possible is important because the long-term unemployed persons have much greater difficulty re-entering the workforce, largely due to the fact that their skills erode and they aren't able to gain new skills learned on the job. This is our nation's greatest threat, a growing number of long-term unemployed youth. Successive governments have been told by the private sector that it is difficult to identify suitably qualified persons to employ. This government recognizes the threat that this poses and is responding to the cries of the private sector and to the needs of our people by enabling Bahamians to be in a position to advance themselves. This progressive government recognizes the threat posed by having a growing number of untrained, unskilled, and unemployable people. That threat encompasses variables discussed earlier that are incubators for crime. This bill, therefore, is a means of addressing our crime problem, contrary to what the member for Montague would wish you to believe. We also recognize that not only must we allocate resources to address these threats and to help our youth acquire the skills they need to obtain jobs, but unlike the former government, we must do so in a fashion that, 1, has structure, 2, proper oversight, 3, provides participants with certification upon completion of training, and 4, is free from the perception of being a scheme to buy votes. That is what we have in this National Training Agency bill. On the matter of oversight, Mr. Speaker, as raised by the opposition, as though it is a bad thing, it is the side opposite that has always prided itself on promoting transparency and accountability in government. They are the ones who say they are the transparent group of politicians, the accountable group of politicians. Government in the sunshine. Government in the sunshine. But when we say we will bring to this place a piece of legislation that has measures to improve accountability, transparency, and oversight, they say no. Not now. They say not now. They say no way. Providing oversight of government programs is what transparent and accountable governments do. As they have said, they are the embodiment of transparency and accountability. It stands to reason that they would wholeheartedly support measures for improving oversight and accountability with this legislation. If this is so, Mr. Speaker, the opposition, if they do in fact believe in accountability and transparency, they should be overwhelmingly in support of any clause in any bill that seeks to ensure transparency and accountability. You see, they have been dogged by allegations, Mr. Speaker. We've heard it in this place. Accusations have been made that people in the 52-week job program implemented by them were collecting a check associated with their enrollment in that program without even presenting for work, because it is reasonable to conclude of a lack of oversight. But this government that they say is not accountable and transparent is ensuring that we have proper oversight in what we seek to do to improve the level of training and preparedness on the part of our people. While we are receiving opposition to this bill from the side opposite, we are being supported by the reports of the private sector and international bodies, as reported in the Nassau Guardian. Atlantis CEO George Marcantonus was quoted as saying that on any given day, Atlantis has vacancies for 400 jobs they cannot fill with local workers. The former chairman of the BCCEC, that's the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce and Employers Confederation, opined that the challenge is a lack of education, and I quote, societal issues. And the IDB report entitled Analysis of the Bahamas' 2012 Wages and Productivity Survey noted that 65% of dismissed employees were let go due to behavioral issues, as reported by the member for Golden Gates earlier today. So clearly, while we do not have the support of the opposition in this initiative, we do have the support of those who have no political axe to grind. The National Training Agency will focus on competency-based training and job placement for those who successfully complete the program. It places an emphasis on training our local workforce in partnership with other government entities and the private sector. It is not expected, Mr. Speaker, that it will compete with the Bahamas Technical and Vocational Institute, as suggested by the side opposite. But it is likely that it will be a very important complement to that very important institution. Yes. There were charges earlier by the opposition that this legislation adds bureaucracy and creates duplication of effort. If the opposition can today argue so strongly for the participation of BTVI in the management and oversight of a training and apprenticeship program, why did they not see fit to employ the services of BTVI in managing their 52-week jobs program? I wonder why. Mama ain't raised no fool. You could talk all you want about how BTVI is what we have now and it more than adequately meets the needs, but why didn't you seek to do it? Why was it instead being managed through the Ministry of Youth and the Ministry of Finance? Why? Because their motives had nothing to do with instituting a permanent training program, but in managing a political ploy designed to win votes in the general election. The argument made earlier about bypassing BTVI was indeed disingenuous, and their motives were then and are now purely political. And I take that matter that they raised very seriously because my constituent heads BTVI, and there should be no suggestion whatsoever that we do not value and respect her contribution and the importance that she plays in developing our young people. The National Training Agency, as a model of public-private sector partnership, is expected to be funded collaboratively by both sectors. I have been advised by the minister responsible that the operational budget for the first year is expected to be some 1.7 million, borne mostly by the private sector training participants, who stand to gain tremendously from a better trained and skilled workforce. The NTA, as reported by the minister responsible, and I quote, will aggressively address the challenge of preparing young adults, in particular those 25 and under, who make up 32% of unemployed persons, for successful entry into the workforce, end quote. The agency will establish the framework for training and assessment using approved or accredited industry training providers, whom will ensure participants are awarded a standardized level of training, regardless of where they are trained, and regardless of by whom they are trained. This guarantees quality control, Mr. Speaker, for those who are trained. I repeat again, this guarantees quality control for those who are trained. And with the participation of City and Guilds, a leading international vocational educational provider with 2 million learners in 10,000 centers, working towards 500 qualifications in 80 countries around the world each year, they lend a significant amount of credibility to this program. We will leverage the international reach of this institution in order to lend global credibility to the certification of trainees and apprentices. Why? Because we want the best for the Bahamian people, irrespective of where their travels may take them, or where there may be opportunities for the awarding of grants that may require the temporary relocation of our people. We often say in this place that we must prepare our people for the global marketplace. Well, what better way than to give prospective employers, both domestic and foreign investors, an internationally accepted standard by which they can measure the suitability of persons for jobs, whether they be in the Bahamas or anywhere in the world. This initiative, Mr. Speaker, will create more employable persons for our local workforce and potentially for job opportunities throughout the world. What right-thinking person could object to such an effort? Initially, the program will target the areas of hospitality and tourism, retail operations and sales, auto service and care, and office procedures. It is expected that as the agency expands, all industries will be encompassed, inclusive of domestic services, landscape maintenance, and allied health services, among others. You see, we are about to open up the critical care block, and for anyone involved in the medical field, I think it is most regrettable to them that when they go in our hospital, they find so many of our medical technicians who provide service to our beloved people are not people who look like them, sound like them, or who originate from any of our islands in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Mr. Barry Rassin opined in the press that he wishes he didn't have to spend so much in work permits in order to bring foreigners here to do work that he prefers Bahamians were in a position to do. Well, that's what this National Training Agency program is going to do. Facilitate the training of people to take on jobs now held by foreign workers. The initial stages of the program will focus on behavioral training to ensure that trainees are prepared not only to achieve competencies in various disciplines, but to be trained in the areas of personal conduct and deportment, skills referred to as soft skills earlier by the member for Elizabeth. Skills that are required to accompany one's practical proficiencies, to ensure that he or she has all the tools necessary to not just obtain a job, but to keep those jobs and to advance their careers. The creation of the National Training Agency is an initiative that we are entrenching in law in hopes that it will become a permanent feature of our national development, rather than leaving such initiatives to the whims of politicians who opt to initiate such training programs just before an election, as the former government did, instead of on a continual basis. That is the responsible way to develop a nation and to prepare its economy for growth. This government is trying to prepare our people for the jobs that an improved economy will create. This government, led by the Right Honorable Member for Centerville, he, as our leader, wants to put Bahamians in a position to receive the dignity of earning a paycheck rather than collecting welfare assistance or resorting to criminal activities to support themselves and their families. We in this administration, led by the Right Honorable Member for Centerville, want to improve the future growth prospects for our young people and country. And we in this administration, led by the Right Honorable Member for Centerville, want to reduce poverty in the Bahamas to an irreducible minimum. And with this bill, we are doing so by investing in the enrichment of our human capital. No responsible person, Mr. Speaker, and no responsible political organization would object to such noble intentions or to such a progressive piece of legislation. And in closing, Mr. Speaker, I just wish to say that I'm a passionate young man, and I care deeply about this country. And while I may make mistakes and do things that I come to regret, nothing will ever stop me from trying to aspire to greater heights and to become a better man. Port Charlotte supports this bill to create a national training authority.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Tall Pines.
Speaker, I wasn't going to speak today, but my brother inspired me. He's on the way back. The Bible says the babe shall lead us.
Yeah, that's right.
He's the youngest one in here, so I got to pay attention to him. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to be very brief in my contribution on this most important initiative, because many have spoken, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, first and foremost, I stand for on behalf of the good people of Tall Pines, Mr. Speaker, who sent me here to work for and on their behalf, and hopefully I'm doing my job on their behalf to make a contribution to the welfare of those persons that I have the privilege of representing in this Parliament, and indeed the welfare of all Bahamians. Mr. Speaker, when I think of this initiative that is before us, it takes me back to the year 1968, We were preparing for the Olympic Games in Mexico City at the time. The boycott was getting in high gear in California, the California relays in Fresno, California. And I'll never forget it, I was 19 years old at the time. And Bill Russell was being interviewed by Howard Cosell, the great Bill Russell and the late Howard Cosell, probably one of the greatest sportcasters in the history of broadcasting. In this interview, he asked Bill Russell, why was it that he was involved in this boycott that was building towards the 1960 Olympic Games, where John Carlos and Tommy Smith on the podium did what they had to do. And he asked Bill Russell, he said, listen, such a successful black athlete like yourself, you've just won a championship, I think it was a 13th championship for the Boston Celtics and all. Why would you take time out of your busy schedule to be with these track and field athletes here in Fresno, California? You are a very, very lucky man. You're rich, you're successful, you're loved by the Celtics and people around the world. And he kept using this term, how lucky Bill Russell was. And Bill Russell said to him, he said, you know, Howard, in my opinion, there's no such thing as luck. He said, but if there is such a thing, let me describe to you what luck is in my life. He said, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. I never forgot it, Mr. Speaker. And I think it brings us back to this bill that is before us today. Because these young people, Mr. Speaker, who are going to this program, they're going to realize that there's no such thing as luck in life. If you're not prepared, when the opportunity comes, you wouldn't even see it, because of your illness and being prepared to know what an opportunity is to begin with. And that's why I think it's so important that I use that phrase again, that luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And of course, as far as I'm concerned, luck really is when preparation not only meets opportunity, but when preparation and opportunities, when you put those two together, it equals success. Mr. Speaker, this training program can help the employed as well as the unemployed of our country to develop their soft skills, which is an essential dimension and a cornerstone of all successful people. Soft skills can simply be defined as a personality trait which is extremely crucial for the success in one's career. Soft skills usually include communication skills, interpersonal skills, team building skills, leadership skills, and customer service skills, just to name but a few. Mr. Speaker, by developing these skills, persons would increase their work performance, build stronger working relationships, improve job performance, and help with promotions and promote career opportunity prospects. Mr. Speaker, today, soft skills are sought after just as much as the technical abilities of a person, and hence, these have a prominent place in deciding the fate of a person in our modern world. In other words, you can't just have the physical attributes to do a job, but you need these skills that is going to take you through life. And I'll give an example. When I went to BEC lunchtime, there was a gentleman meeting there to see me. Said that his mother had sent me to me. He was looking for a job, and the fellow had on slippers. And he said to me, Mr. Millett, my mother spoke to you yesterday, and I'm here to see about that job. I said, no, you ain't here to see me. I said, you're here to go home with your slippers back on. And I refused to see him. Why would I see a guy wearing slippers? Number one, he ain't serious about working, because no one comes to work in slippers. And he said to me, well, he ain't working, so he could wear slippers. I said, but you don't want to work. That's why you're wearing your slippers. This is what the training program is all about, teaching the youngsters skills, teaching them how to present themselves, teaching them how to address others, teaching them what the world is about and what is expected of you. Mr. Speaker, you'll be shocked at the amount of young people in this country today who are not only unemployed, but has no basic skills. I'm talking about rock bottom skills. You ask them, what can you do? The average young lady in my constituency were looking for a job, and I said, listen, give me one of your resume, let me see if I can help you. And 9 out of 10 of them worked to run restaurant, worked to a bar, worked to a braiding place, some hairdressing place. And I said, well, what it is you want to do? Well, Mr. Miller, I know the computer, and I can work on computers. I said, well, I don't know the computers at all. But what is your educational background? I'm sorry to say that most of them is almost zero. You come out of school without not even the basic requirements that is necessary to enable a human being to earn a decent living. And irrespective of what the man on Paradise Island may say, that he needs 400 people every day, if he really needed those payments, Mr. Speaker, they would develop their own training program to train our people. Because don't tell me that our people are untrainable. I don't buy that. I agree that we need people. But Bahamians are not dumb, and they're not stupid. And if you want to see how great our people are, those with basic education or with no education at all, go on Bay Street. And you would see what God has given them, the gifts. So don't tell me that we cannot learn. Any one of us have the ability to learn the job if you give us an opportunity to develop our skills and develop ourselves as human beings. We would put our minds to it and we would make something out of ourselves. So this foolishness with 400 people a day, he just don't want to hire any Bahamians. So let's get over that. Mr. Speaker, when you look at the job market today and the amount of unemployed young people, Mr. Speaker, especially the women, because I must admit, most of the fellas, Mr. Speaker, that I come in contact really don't want work. I can be honest with you. I ain't hitting the brothers. But most of them don't want work. They want a job. They want a paycheck on Friday. But don't ask the brother to work. That ain't their vocabulary. It just does not happen. I've been in business now since 1976. You know, Mr. Speaker, friend Mr. Kirk Tink and I, my dear friend, departed us unfortunately. In 1974, we went to the Royal Bank of Canada to borrow $60,000 to start to make paint and joint compound in the Bahamas. The fellow at that time, who was the manager right here on Bay Street, told us, you know, you all fellas don't know what you're doing. I want to let you go to a friend of mine in Miami who was make paint, and you all could sell his paint here in the Bahamas. You know why he said it? Because none of us, Mr. Tinker was a brilliant man in the paint business, but he didn't have a certificate or a degree or the book smart. When I say book smart, he was brilliant. He went to GHS, and a good student at GHS, the honorable members there would know him. And he was a brilliant man. You know what he did? There was a school in Lejola, Missouri, a paint and coating school. Craig said, tell you what I can do. You stay here. Because I was working with the Bahamas Relevant Corporation at the time. He said, I can go and get my certificate. He went up there for 6 weeks. Made all A's, came back. He was probably the most profound paint expert in the history of our country. And I say that to say this, Mr. Speaker. When you look at the fact that 7 out of every 10 new businesses, not only in the Bahamas but around the world, go out of business within 3 years. That's the norm. Within 3 years, every new business, I don't care if it's Silicon Valley, if it's Tokyo, Japan, anywhere in Europe, anywhere around the globe, 7 out of 10 new businesses that go in business today, in 3 years, 7 out of that 10 is going to be out of business. And you know, the one thing they tell you, when you go to the bank to get money, where's your experience? Why should I lend you my money to a person who has no experience in the area that you want to get involved with? The quickest area, or the quickest means to fail is not to know the business that you're going into. You must have that experience. And that is why these programs are so important, to give our young people, to impart to them the knowledge that is needed to make them a success. At least attempt to make them a success. Because if you believe it's tough overseas, in this country it's tougher. Because the Bahamian market is gobbled up by the few. And before they let you get a foothold in this market, Mr. Speaker, they will collude and run you under the ground. I have fought it for over 30 years of my life. And I have seen the older fellas than me, and the younger ones come, and they have gone. I've seen them put up their life savings to go into business and end up with zero. And when I say zero, I mean what they had gone. Sometimes you mortgage your family, you lose your wife and your children, and they'll take your grandchildren and then mortgage the set who ain't born yet. And when they come, the fellas, I own you too, because your daddy still got this bill here. Great-grandchildren, fella waiting for them. They ain't come yet. We're waiting for them. That's how tough it is in this market to succeed. This ain't no easy place, you know. This little town called the Bahamas, one of the toughest places on this earth when it comes to being in business and being successful. And don't depend on your brothers and sisters or the black Bahamians support you now. Not in this lifetime. I didn't finish with that. They ain't gonna support you. Fellas, you talk about why you fail. The Bank of the Bahamas will lend you the money and they will buy nothing from you. The local banks will put you in business and then help them run you out of business. The same people who give you the money, they say go start something, don't patronize your businesses. In many instances, the fellas in the government departments will collude and run you out of business. Been happening for over 30, 40 years. And I can name a list of men and women who have tried it. And this is why, Mr. Speaker, these programs are so important. To first put the mental skills and the tenacity in these young people to know that, listen, it ain't easy out there. It's a tough world out there. Only the strong survive. If you're weak, you ain't gonna survive out there. If you gotta make that payroll every week, my brother, dog eat your lunch. And Mr. Speaker, we have so many young people. See, whether we like it or not, you know. Some of those young persons who are there on the blocks today, they're going to rise to the occasion. With opportunities, they're going to rise to the top. Always in any society, those among us just rise to the top and make their contribution. They all make a contribution, but some greater than others, because it's a God-given gift. And the one thing that man don't give you, as my father always taught me, is this innate thing to survive and be successful. Ambition. Only God give man ambition. Man don't give man ambition. That's in you. That's something that God put in you, in your spirit, that you got this ambition to be somebody. You got this desire that I want to succeed at something in life, that I want to make myself somebody. I want to be somebody. You got to learn these skills that will be embellished in this program to enable you to have a fighting chance to succeed. It ain't gonna be easy now, because ain't nobody can give you nothing. They ain't gonna take what you got. No, don't look for them to give you nothing now. You put out your hand, they take it off. Many fellas walk around here with knocks. Mr. Speaker, you know, soft skills do not come naturally for many persons. And I believe these training programs can help persons who need to develop and improve their skills so that they will become a natural to them when dealing with other people. A lot of people can't deal with people on a day-to-day basis, you know. You know, you have to learn these things. You have to realize that the ethics of work is a wonderful thing. You know, you can't go on the man's job at 10 o'clock if you're supposed to be there 8 o'clock. You can't steal the fella stuff, because most 9 out of 10 payments, when they work for you after a year, they are your co-owner. They don't employ you anymore, you know. You see the fella thief, the fella said, but Mr. Miller, what's the problem? He's doing it every day. I may take 1 gallon of paint and he take 5. Why? I don't know why you're born with me. And they actually tell you this. And I thank him sometimes. Because he's right. The other fella took 10, he take 1. I gave him another 1. But this is what we face. Rupert Roberts, Super Value. Every year for the last 20 years, he tells me that he sets aside $4.5 million for theft. Every year for the last 20 years, Rupert Roberts from Super Value puts aside $4.5 million for theft. And you wonder why the cost of your food is so high?
Yeah.
You know, that's, you know, you have to learn that when you work for someone and they're paying you a salary, you don't know what they're catching to keep you employed. In this market today, Mr. Speaker, I met a lady outside today. One of our colleagues in here introduced me to her. one of the big number places just laid off 20 people on Friday. Now them fellas catching hell now. That's how bad things are. That they're beginning to lay off. The number houses are laying off staff.
And those number buyers mad like hell with that, and they tell them to say no.
I can talk to you again. But to speak, you know, this program is going to go a long way in assisting our people in going into every area of this economy. In the hotel industry, Mr. Speaker, when you look at what is happening today in our number one sector, when you can hardly find a Bahamian with any say in our number one industry. And we depend on that, what, 6 out of every $10 that comes into this country comes by way of tourism. And we have little or no say. When the people in the hotel industry, those who are on the Western Strip and elsewhere are crying that the foreigners are coming here for Bahamians to train them, and they're taking the best jobs. This training program should enable them to become confident, enable them to accrue all the necessary skills, enable them to compete on a global level. I am told now that what is happening in the industry now, those Bahamians who complain about what is going on in some areas, they send them off now for things like in those other places. Mr. Speaker, this program is a worthy program. It is long overdue. I believe it's going to be beneficial to assisting our people in acquiring the skills that are so necessary to make them competent, but more important, Mr. Speaker, to make them self-reliant on themselves. Instead of going down picking up a check from the welfare line, they'll be able to support their families. And Mr. Speaker, let me tell you something. Many families in this country today got trouble to meet their obligations. Many Bahamians in this country tonight is going to go to bed hungry. Got to go to bed with a decent meal, whether we like it or not. We may not see it. People in this country are catching eternal hell. Many Bahamians catching hell. And we have an obligation, whatever plans we try to initiate, to see to it that those plans would uplift their life, upgrade their status, and enable them to provide for themselves. And by extension, they provide for their families. And by that extension, they provide for the country, because if we produce better skilled workers, we produce a better country. Because each one of those places have a contribution to make to our lives and to our country's welfare. So, Mr. Speaker, I just want to say again, I stand in full support of this bill. I think it's going to go a long way. I think we need to give it an opportunity to work and give those young people in this country an opportunity that they can see a brighter future for themselves, Mr. Speaker. I wholeheartedly support this bill, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I start, first I'd like to thank my colleagues, whom I thought did an excellent job this morning in presenting the government's position, and at the same time in pointing out some faults in the bill that we're here speaking today about, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy that the government have made some of the necessary amendments, but as I progress, 2 issues that I am still very concerned about, and I hope the government would take those 2 issues into consideration and make the necessary adjustments. But, Mr. Speaker, today we're here to debate the establishment of a national training agency. But allow me, Mr. Speaker, to express that while I speak here today, I'm not here to bash the government or the side opposite. I'm not here to bash them on their wrongdoings or their undelivered promises, nor am I here to talk about the inefficient management of our country, nor am I here today to remind them of the possible delay of the liberalization of BTC and its implications, or the denial of Bahamians the opportunity to purchase 5% of BTC shares, which was left by us so that Bahamians can share in the wealth of BTC. I'm not here, Mr. Speaker, to remind the side opposite of the crime that we experience today, nor am I here to remind them that the Bahamas now in the world market is now rated by World Health Organization as the 18th murder capital in the world. But, Mr. Speaker, what is amazing is as I look in the Tribune this morning, and the Guardian, even the Deputy Prime Minister admits that no one is safe. And at one point...
Member yields. Chair recognizes the honourable member for Carolyn Rumpley in San Salvador.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I take this opportunity, I thank you for yielding, because oftentimes the headline in the newspaper does not reflect all that is said or take out the context what is said and the circumstances under which what was said was in fact said. I was asked about the tragic events that touched and concerned me in respect of someone who's been personal to me for the last 1 year. Yes, that was sad to see. In the conversation I had, they spoke about what does this mean to the safety of persons. Right? And I was speaking specifically to the fact that criminal activity was touching all strata of society. Police officers, the criminal himself was the victim of crime. That's the context in which I'm saying no one is safe, meaning no station, no one in what station of life is safe. Now that's the context in which I was speaking to the reporters in that very short, brief moment on my way to Captain. They stopped me, they talked about it. I had just come from the hospital, visiting my aide, very encouraged by what I'd seen and reflecting on the fact that here was a fine, exemplary police officer who exhibited, a professional behavior with me and others. And here he was becoming a victim of crime. I was never intending to say at any time that no one is safe. No one in the context of whatever strata of life you might be in.
Absolutely, yes.
Will be immune from crime. And then I went on to call on all of us of society coming together to assault this scourge of crime. That's the context in which I say. And I just want that to be clear so that no alarm is sent out to suggest that we are all not safe.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Member, before you move on, myself and the member for Charlotte had the opportunity to visit with Sergeant Sweeting today, and he's in good spirits, and he is resolved in his fight of crime for the future. This will not get him down. He will be back shortly. Member?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, the government has the solution to crime. Unfortunately, this article is already viral. And but, Mr. Speaker, why that is so important to me is I want to give an example of an experience that I've had myself about 2 weeks ago. While driving on Wolf Road, the traffic congested and moving very slowly. Suddenly, my front car door was opened and a young man rushed in and sat immediately next to me and closed my door while I was driving. I tried my best to get him out of my vehicle, and you can imagine there were words exchanged between both of us. But there was no blows, Mr. Speaker. But the words that were exchanged between both of us, he placing himself in my front seat I cannot repeat. But, Mr. Speaker, I could not get him out of my vehicle, and he started to blame me for all the problems that we have today, blame myself and the Prime Minister and looking for solutions, and I'm a part of the problem, and therefore I must be dealt with, and government must be dealt with, and whatever else. But, Mr. Speaker, I had difficulty getting him out of my vehicle, and eventually a service station that was near, I drove to the service station and insisted that he disembark my vehicle. And at the service station, he jumped out. But, Mr. Speaker, I point that out. I state that to point out how important it is while driving one's vehicle today. Yesterday, we had the liberty of leaving all glass down and doors unlocked. But the liberty of having doors unlocked today no longer exists. That is being eroded rapidly, Mr. Speaker. So I brought that point up so that individuals would be aware of my own personal experience. But fortunately, I was not harmed. Mr. Speaker, I am here this evening to enunciate what we collectively can do to build a better country and future for our people. Especially the young people of our society, Mr. Speaker, the young people who the unemployment rate as high as 30%, and they are the future of our society. And those are individuals who we must help to build and find support for. Those are the individuals we must protect because they are the foundation moving forward. But, Mr. Speaker, we must build a country where we can place ourselves in a position of exporting jobs. We should not only be concentrating on importing jobs and issuing work permits, but we should aim towards developing, garnishing, and educating our people and giving them the necessary skills and develop a pool so that our resources are so great that we place ourselves in the position of exporting. And that's what we should be looking at, Mr. Speaker. Because as we continue to import jobs, it subsequently results in demoralization of our populace. And that, Mr. Speaker, we should try to avoid. But, Mr. Speaker, this can only be done. This can only be done if we put our best minds together to ensure that we maintain a certain standard and quality of life so that each and every Bahamian in our society has an opportunity to achieve what I term as the Bahamian dream. And that opportunity, Mr. Speaker, that dream is a home, a good fundamental education, and a safe environment. Not as we see here within the front page today, but a safe environment to live in. Mr. Speaker, today, as we look around, we see that the Bahamian dream is being shattered while the side opposite continues to sell us unrealistic dreams. And as we move forward, we must always remember that we must put our country first. And if we adopt that motto, think not of ourselves, but of our country. And if we adopt that motto, Mr. Speaker, then the Bahamas, our country, can never fail. On the precipice of our 40th anniversary, we must ensure that we learn from the past, improve the present, while preparing ourselves for the future. Mr. Speaker, while we were in government, the FNM reintroduced the 52-week National Job Readiness skills and training program with the objective to train 4,000 young people to fill positions, both in the private and the public sector. And many persons took advantage of that. The idea was individuals were placed within a job site, and at the end of 1 year, they would have acquired that skill and done so well and worked so hard within that environment that they would have been asked to stay on and subsequently hired. Mr. Speaker, I have no regrets for such a program. That was the right thing to do at that time. Unemployment was high. Individuals had difficulty meeting light bills, telephone bills, food, mortgages, rent. And this gave them some degree of respect and dignity within themselves, Mr. Speaker. And yes, you may say that we spent $24 million, but we spent $24 million. Mr. Speaker, allow me to complete. We spent $24 million, but haven't recognized that there were a lot more people who needed help, who needed their respect also, who needed to try and fend for themselves. As right-thinking Bahamians, I ask the Bahamian society out there, were we wrong to look after Bahamians to ensure that they could feed their families, they can pay their light bills, and they can take care of themselves? I ask that question not of the members opposite, but I ask that as I stand here to the Bahamian people, were we wrong in giving the Bahamian people dignity and respect, Mr. Speaker? And I can say, Mr. Speaker, that in some areas, there were as high as 60% of individuals within some job settings that remained within the job setting. Mr. Speaker, I think that is an excellent record. The bill we debate today, Mr. Speaker, appears to be a repackaging of the 52-week job readiness and skills training program. However, the side opposite would never admit. They would never admit that what we did at that time was the right thing to do at that time. Mr. Speaker, you see, this is what I alluded to in the opening. In order for us to move forward effectively as a nation, we must put petty politics aside and ensure that we make sustainable decisions that any successive government would build upon. Mr. Speaker, in order for us to move forward, we must continue building upon what was there, not dismantle. But we must not destroy. We must not destroy because of a lack of vision. This government, Mr. Speaker, I can say, appear visionless, clueless, and yes, they are reapers. Reapers of our programs that we set forth, reapers of our good governance. And the Prime Minister himself said the other day, while opening the Pompey Square, he said, some are reapers and some are sowers. We sowed and they reap. We will be back soon, and what they sow, we will reap. Let's hope they sow some good, not all bad. Currently, Mr. Speaker, Jamaica has a national training program called Heart Trust, Training and Resource Development. This program is funded by industrial taxes, businesses. However, the program tabled here is partially funded by national insurance. And Mr. Speaker, I somewhat wonder whether national insurance would not be abused for all the different programs and projects that are going on. And Mr. Speaker, it begs one to wonder where the program created to provide jobs for friends and families, with Bahamian taxpayers footing some of the bill. Must we continue, Mr. Speaker, to abuse national insurance? I hope upon my retirement, pension, some is still left for the benefit of myself and others. The bill, Mr. Speaker, provides for the establishment of inspectors who will have the right, without a warrant, to enter any premises with reasonable cause to believe that a trainee has within the previous 6 months been an apprentice, intern, or otherwise employed under the condition of this act. Mr. Speaker, this caused some degree of concern and alarm, as this is broad powers placed within the inspector, upon the inspector. And I hope the government would look at this and review even the apprentice bill, which has some degree of clarification, because one must have some guidelines, some format as to what exactly they're inspecting, looking for. It cannot be widely open or broad spectrum, Mr. Speaker, because open endlessly, as is implied here, can lead, Mr. Speaker, to intimidation, can lead to bribery, and even some form of victimization. And the bill does not speak, Mr. Speaker, to the qualifications of the inspector. But these inspectors can enter premises only based on reasonable cause. Reasonable cause. And where in this bill is it specified that these inspectors will be reasonable, professionals, and not strictly political? Mr. Speaker, rather than creating another layer of bureaucracy, it is recommended, and is strongly recommended, that, and I realize and recognize what the government is trying to do, but I strongly recommend that BTVI, whose mission statement reads, and I quote, to provide learning opportunities that enable individuals to be globally competitive and economically independent. With that mission statement, Mr. Speaker, I think BTVI should be strengthened. More funding should be channeled into BTVI. For all intents and purposes, the lecturers are professionals within their own right, contractors who has given up their time. And I can speak of a personal experience of a plumber who was very qualified, came from the United States with adequate qualifications and degree, had his business, but wanted to assist at BTVI. And the salary scale was so prohibitive that he could not work, though he wanted to make a contribution to his country, but he could not work in that setting for that type of salary. As a result of that, he engaged more within the private sector and eventually left and returned to the United States. But to speak, I brought that point out to point out that the lecturers within that institution, when you're trying to train your young people, your students, etc., you would want the best. But you cannot have the best if you don't pay them properly. You cannot have the best if you don't fund the institution properly so that they would have all the necessary equipment, tools, and technology available to them. Mr. Speaker, currently BTVI has a sound series of programs. And just to mention a few, information technology, which is very, very important as the world moves towards a technological era. That's very important. Construction technology. And Mr. Speaker, when we think of construction, we only think of laying blocks, mortar, whatever else. But what is unique about what they teach in terms of construction technology, it includes project management, which is very, very important. And it also includes a bidding exercise so that the individual knows how to put bidding documents together and thus become competitive within the job market. There are trade training in mechanics, electronics, construction, and fashion, to name just a few. And BTVI tries its best to remain on the cutting edge of technology, because just recently it's introduced a solar energy program which proves that they are truly preparing our students for jobs in the fast-growing new industry. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the solar industry is new. And this new area, I ask the government to properly regulate this area now, today. Because if not properly regulated, what will happen, many individuals will be taken advantage of by unscrupulous contractors and individuals. And it's essential that such programs in BTVI allows for the proper certification, which would again protect our Bahamian citizens, so that as individuals embark on this new frontier that our society are gullible for, at least they would have some degree of certification and safeguard for our populace. Presently, Mr. Speaker, the training at BTVI allows for apprentice programs within the private sector, providing the necessary linkages between training and job experiences. And this usually results in a very, very high employment rate within that sector. Already, BTVI has articulation agreements with institutions in the United States, Canada, and even the Caribbean, where their credits would be accepted. This shows that they are on the right track. And with proper funding, they can get the necessary accreditation by institutions, United States, Canada, etc. And this would allow our students to be facilitated in those particular institutions, be it the U.S. or Canada.
Martha, member for Martha.
Having their qualifications recognized by those institutions would give them an opportunity to partake in the job market abroad should opportunities arise, because they would already be accredited not only here but abroad. But this, Mr. Speaker, would be an excellent opportunity for our Bahamians. So when we think of training, we must not look at a myopic picture. We must look at a global picture. So we train not just for our local community or Bahamas, but we must train with view that we can export our knowledge to other parts of the Caribbean, other parts of the world, but not just export our knowledge to Inagua or Mayaguana or within the Bahamas itself. And BTVI, when we look at the funding, the review of their current budget, Mr. Speaker, the funding had decreased, in spite of what the minister said. The funding had decreased from approximately $5.6 million to $4.6. If we are serious about preparing our young people for the future, then more funds should be pushed into such an institution.
Member rises on the point of order. The chair recognizes the member from Martha.
Mr. Speaker, I don't know why the other side, Dr. Noddy. I don't know why the other side continues to go on this point. Mr. Speaker, I've stood up now, this is about the fourth or fifth time addressing this point. If you go to the head in the budget, head, I think it's 36.
36.
You go to head 36, Mr. Speaker. You look at personal emoluments and allowances, Mr. Speaker. You will see under the line item there for salaries, there's an increase of $1.5 million, Mr. Speaker. $1.5 million. That is to accommodate the hiring of more lecturers for the expansion of programs that will be instituted at BTVI in this upcoming year. The Minister of Finance, the member for Golden Isles, went through in detail at the beginning of the budget process how the reassignment of various categories were either moved out of certain ministries into other ministries. Within the Ministry of Education, I made it clear that there were no cuts with regard to the delivery of service in any ministry under which the Ministry of Education has under its portfolio. In fact, when you look closely, you will see that in fact there's been an increase in funding to those areas, including BTVI. There's been an increase in funding to BTVI, Mr. Speaker. Yes, the budget may have been cut, but it has not been cut in any areas dealing with the delivery of services. Those areas were transferred out to other ministries. So the members know it's erroneous, and yet they still continue to go on. Yes, it's been cut. That's fine. But don't say, how could we cut it, as implying that it's impacting the delivery of services at BTVI or the expansion of services. As a matter of fact, as I state, we are expanding BTVI to impact more students. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Member for Kalani.
Mr. Speaker,
the minister indicates that it has been cut, but not necessary to put a color to it, other than an opinion, of course. Member for Kalani may continue.
I refer to the budget.
Yeah.
Allow me to put this in perspective in layman terminology. You have a school, and yes, you increase the number of employees, but at the same time, you do not increase the materials and equipments necessary. What subsequently happened, you have employers, but underemployment. In other words, they're there with not much to do. Allow me to complete. The computer software and supplies and accessory decrease. When you look at learning aids, tapes, and library, these are materials that BTC would need. They need just BTVI. They need not just manpower. You need materials also to function. That's the type of institution we're talking about.
Member for Marathon.
Let me assist him, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, BTVI is not totally funded by the government. BTVI has its own revenue. The fact, Mr. Speaker, that we are now paying for more salaries allows them to use more of the money they receive in these other areas, Mr. Speaker. It's as simple as that. Nothing complicated.
Members of
Mr. Speaker?
I'm hearing a cell phone. That should be.
It's not mine, no. Mr. Speaker, it's as simple as that.
Thank you.
We are allocating more monies from the government side to assist them with hiring people. We do not take care of 100% of BTVI's budget. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Mr. Speaker, the point still remains.
Member for Kalani.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The point still remains that BTVI, if we are serious about preparing our students for the future, our young people for the future, you need not only manpower, you also need resources. If you are embarking on new technology in terms of solar, you need teachers, yes, but you need solar panels also for demonstration. I'm only giving an example. The member trying to present himself today, yes, he's Minister of Education, but you do not have monopoly on knowledge. You are not the smartest man.
Continue to speak to the chair, member for Kalani.
Mr. Speaker?
Brilliant.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not saying I'm
Member
the smartest man.
member for Martha.
Thank you. I'm in fact far from it, Mr. Speaker. But I do know about the ministry in which I have responsibility for. I'm very familiar with that ministry. And, Mr. Speaker, the point I made, and this is a real point, enrollment at BTVI increased by 25% last year. You know what it is to increase by 25% in 1 year, Mr. Speaker? A dramatic increase. That requires that moving forward, we have allocated for the increase of monies to employ additional lecturers, because we anticipate that's going to increase even more through what we're doing through a national training agency. We made provision for that. There has been no cut with regard to the allocation of funds that they will receive for their operations, Mr. Speaker. In fact, as I said, they're going to have a major increase, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I recognize my time has passed. But, Mr. Speaker, it is important for the Bahamas to provide not only training for its citizens, but an opportunity to create a culture of continuous education and certification so that we improve our service levels, job productivity and output, thus our workforce competitiveness. The Hotel Training College, for example, should commence with proper funding, a program to certify housekeepers and domestic workers, so that within our Commonwealth, all our housekeepers and domestic workers are certified and standardized. That improves quality of care. That improves quality performance, etc. Mr. Speaker, that would also assist in increasing the salary scale of those individuals. And we place ourselves in a position where, like Singapore, we can export employment, not necessarily import. And as individuals come here who want to engage in that type of market, then they too must be certified and become part of our structure. In closing, Mr. Speaker, it has always been said that the government will have its way, but the opposition most certainly, while we're here, will have our say. Most noteworthy today, Mr. Speaker, is we're discussing this bill today, and as the member stated, the opening of the Darwell building would take place, I think, the 15th of July. And there's some concern about who it's rented from. And I agree with the Prime Minister, we're a small population, and from time to time, rental may occur or lease may occur among politicians, friends, etc. But you only ask for transparency.
Yeah.
And we ask why one family has rental here and in Grand Bahama. Could it not be shared? That's all we ask, transparency. But I agree with the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the opposition is not against training Bahamians, but we oppose wastage. We oppose duplication. But we are in favor of building upon and supporting and strengthening programs that are foundational to our future. Let's build a better Bahamas for our future generations. Let's ensure that we make the right decisions to protect our country, our citizens, and our way of life. Let us move forward as one Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, I would like the government to consider the ambiguity between this bill and the Apprentice Act, so as that can be resolved, and look at the inspector section of the bill, so as that, because the opposition has serious concern. But Mr. Speaker, I have 1 minute left, and I want to refer to concerns within my constituency, Kalani. We've had seawall on the western side, and we've had some damage to the coastal area. And rather than constructing seawall, there's this ugly bunker-type system of sandbags that's essentially taller than I am. Mr. Speaker, it looks terrible. The tourists are asking why the Bahamas, a first supposedly first world country moving to bunker. Does the government know something that we don't know? Are we going to be attacked from the West? Why we have this bunker system? But, Mr. Prime Minister, I have spoke to the engineers, and that's the excuse they gave, that they will cover. But it's extremely ugly. It's destructive. Absolutely. But at least continue the seawall if necessary. But not this bunker. I mean, we have a lot of shooting around, but we don't need this type of protection in the West. So I ask that, you know, the tourists are concerned about it. The residents in Kalani are concerned about it. An extension of sandbags along the coast. It does not look well in a first world nation. And I know you are a caring Prime Minister. I know you live in the West. You are a member of my constituency. I am your representative. As your representative, I ask, remove this bunker system. We're not going to be attacked from the West. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many. The Chair recognizes Honourable Member for South and Central Eleuthera.
Yeah, man. If it pleases you, Mr. Speaker, I rise, albeit briefly, on behalf of the great people of Central and South Eleuthera. It is my privilege to speak on their behalf in respect of this bill, which we fully support. Mr. Speaker, much has been made of the similarities, such as they are, between the National Training Agency Bill, the Apprenticeship Act, and the BTVI Act. In order to first put paid to some of the criticisms, I wish to first of all point out the actual provisions, such as the basis of the allegation that the bill is a copy of this earlier legislation. And quite frankly, I'm surprised that members opposite who would have taken the time to read the different pieces of legislation to which they referred would have come here and so openly stated something that cannot be substantiated from a reading of the legislation. If one looks first at the Apprenticeship Act, which was enacted in 1968 and brought into force in 1983, the duties and functions of the board dealing with apprentices. Without prejudice to the other provisions contained in this act, the board shall perform the following duties and functions. A, it shall, at the request of the minister, and may of its own motion, investigate and make recommendations to the minister on any matters connected with this act. B, it shall perform such duties and functions in regard to any matter concerning apprenticeship as may be prescribed by rules made under Section 20 of this act. If you compare that, Mr. Speaker, with Clause 5 of the National Training Agency Bill, you will, at a glance, see that Clause 5 is far more extensive than any of the functions set out in Section 4 of the Apprenticeship Act. And I will demonstrate that by simply reading it. The functions of the agency are to A, prepare and implement plans for workforce vocational training in accordance with national policies, economic needs, and industry demands. B, engage in activities geared towards increasing the capacity of individuals to participate effectively in the workforce, thereby improving their productivity and employability. C, identify, develop, and promote industry standards for occupations and training programs, and develop assessment instruments that meet national, regional, and international standards. D, provide a national certification framework to establish national and vocational qualifications that are recognized and accepted regionally and internationally, and to ensure coordination and collaboration among providers of technical vocational education and training. Let me stick a pin there, Mr. Speaker, because it is clear that this legislation anticipates the existence of other training activities and entities in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. At the very heart of it, it assumes that there are other persons concerned with training and delivering services connected to training. So that there's bound to be some similarity in what the agency does and what these other providers of training are doing in our country. What this section does is to specify in some detail the exact things that are required of the agency. And so I go on. C, increase the number of individuals pursuing technical vocational education and training as a career. F, increase the quality of training by delivering competency-based training through a more responsive and flexible delivery and assessment system. G, network and cooperate with public-private sector entities in matters related to the development of competency-based training. H, approve and certify courses to be pursued by persons desirous of obtaining vocational education and training through the agency's network of accredited training providers. I, approve, accredit, and register public or private institutions, organizations, programs, or any training providers that wish to provide training, assessment services, or both to the agency to ensure that they are compliant with the minimum criteria as determined by the agency. J, develop comprehensive quality assurance strategies to ensure that program delivery by training providers meet agency standards. K, register and approve persons as instructors or assessors of the agency's accredited training providers. L, maintain a register of agencies' registrants, trainees, training providers, assessors, and certified persons. M, implement and maintain a labor market information system in collaboration with the Department of Labor's Employment Data Bank. Mr. Speaker, let me pause there. Nowhere in the BTVI legislation, nor in the Apprenticeship Act, is there any statutory attempt to create a data bank for labor resources for the country. Right. So that the assumption that this is some copy of anything that our predecessors had done, it's really a non-existent criticism. I'm just surprised that it could be uttered with such sobriety in this place. N, provide statistical data and information to the government and the relevant agencies. O, provide trainee referral and placement services to training providers, institutions, programs, organizations, and employers. Again, nothing exists in statute in our country providing for any network that enables persons who are trained by government institutions or by private institutions to be able to access employment. this provides a framework for that. I'm just staggered that people could have stood up here all day uttering nonsense. Well, obviously when the truth confronted them, they had to focus on something else. P, institute, review, and maintain a system of assessment, certification, and award in relation to persons trained in the technical and vocational fields. Q, grant certificates and other awards and submit reports regarding persons who are assessed pursuant to paragraph P. R, designate a central assessment and referral center where persons who wish to access the agency's services shall register, be assessed, and referred as is applicable. S, establish and maintain a system of assessment and recognition of prior learning or training experience in harmony with established competency standards. T, produce booklets, brochures, programs, media, advertising, and other promotional materials to enhance the image of competency-based vocational training and certification as the catalyst for building a productivity-focused, service-driven workforce. U, develop, implement, and promote national occupational standards. V, develop and implement a national vocation qualification BA. W, design and develop a tracking and monitoring system to measure the results of the agency's activities. X, provide for quality assurance through a technical vocational educational training. Mr. Speaker, clearly Clause 5 sets out in the most comprehensive of details the functions and duties of the agency. It provides a basis upon which the agency may be judged from year to year. In itself, provided that the clause, when enacted, is followed by the agency itself will be on a regular basis ensuring that a constant review of its activities and of its graduates is performed. And the whole object of this is to better prepare our workforce for work. It also enables persons who are finished their training to have access to a governmental institution which actually attempts to have them placed in jobs. So we are not just in the blind sending people out into the wilderness looking for a job. And when people come and say, we have 400 jobs which we cannot fill, they're able to say that to an agency of the government, which is able to say, well, we are surprised by that because we have 400 or 500 people here who fit that job description. Here are their names. Here are their email addresses. Here are their telephone numbers. In fact, we'll call them for you. So that the temptation of persons to sully the reputation of this country by suggesting that we are unqualified for work or somehow too lazy to attempt to get work will be dispelled as it is uttered. I had not intended, Mr. Speaker, to speak today on this, not because I didn't think it was important, but because I thought that this would have been an uncontroversial piece of legislation. I could not imagine, in my most horrid of nightmares, that political disingenuity could reach the level, the nadir to which we have descended during the entirety of this day. I'm amazed. And we ought to really be raising our game a lot in here, particularly when it comes to young people for whom this agency will be a boon. This represents the creation of an opportunity which many people have dreamed of. I happen to represent a community where there are hundreds of young people for whom the school system has been somewhat of a failure to them. This legislation creates an agency which I'm told in the first quarter of next year will be set up and operational in Eleuthera. But it gives not only me hope, but it gives young women and young men who are currently unemployed the prospect that their government is providing something to enable them to be independent of their member funds. Because they don't need me to get them a job. I may help, but there's an institution of government to which they may go to, quite independent of me. They may be F&M, they may be DNA, most of them are PLP, but that is just how it is. We are providing for everyone. And you know, Mr. Speaker, I've heard about all these people who were hired and continue to work following the 52-week program, but I can identify not a single one in my constituency. Not one. Not one. Those who were hired in the private sector, when the subsidy left, the job went. Because the job was not a sustainable economic entity. And quite frankly, I'm surprised that members of it continue to rely on this as some evidence of their prudence and competence in the economic management of our affairs. It simply is not the case. In fact, we are the government that is bringing jobs, hotels, construction work, business opportunities in the medical area. Right there in Eleuthera, we are demonstrating on a day-in and day-out basis why it was prudent for them to be on the side where they are today. Yeah. But, Mr. Speaker, for completeness, if you look at the BTVI Act of 2010, a piece of legislation enacted by their administration, compare the long list of things I read from Clause 5 with Section 5. The functions of the Institute are A, to provide technical and vocational training, B, to provide for the dissemination of knowledge to equip students with practical, technical, and vocational skills to prepare them for employment and to foster entrepreneurship. C, enter into public and private sector partnerships with employers, trade or commercial confederations, and other societal stakeholders to develop courses of instruction and instructional methodologies necessary to attain synergy and cohesion between instruction and training at the Institute and the needs of the national economy. D, grant diplomas, certificates, or other awards and honors as are usually conferred by similar institutions. E, enter into any association or affiliation with career or technical institutions, whether within the Bahamas or otherwise, as the Institute may deem necessary and appropriate. F, enter into arrangements with employers in the private sector for the training of employees in the areas specified under subsection 2, and the employer shall be responsible for the payment of fees relating to such training. 2, without prejudice to the generality of subsection 1A and B, the Institute shall provide a place of training offering instruction including but not limited to all of the following fields of education: construction trades, mechanical trades, handicraft. D, ornamental landscaping and horticulture. E, maritime trades. F, technology. G, commerce. H, cosmetology and personal grooming trades. I, information communication technology. And 3, the minister may by order extend the category specified under subsection 2. So clearly, the Bahamas Technical and Vocational Institute Act 2010 was setting up a college of some sort, a school. The agency is not a school. It is an agency which embraces the schools that are in existence and provides a training framework around which a training scheme is to be implemented. The reason that we have gone to such lengths to describe with specificity what the agency is about is so that we are able to defend the argument that we are not transparent, because we have demonstrated such a pristine, clear delineation of what the agency is doing that it is easily judged. In contrast, $48 million having been spent, not a single diploma has been issued to anyone. Not a single certificate has been issued to anyone. There is no report saying that such and such a person worked at so-and-so place. Had members opposite really been serious about setting up a training agency in the way that they are now saying that they wish to have done, it would have made sense for them to have incorporated the 52-week program with the provisions of the Apprenticeship Act. It would then have provided a framework against which one could measure whether in fact training was being done or votes were being purchased. It would have been a transparent way of governing. It would have been a transparent way of providing a much needed training facility to our public. Yes. And I'm just awestruck by the sheer temerity of members opposite when they repeat the foolishness that they've uttered about giving people a chance. But public funds.
Member yields. Chair recognizes member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, illegal to purchase votes. If the member has evidence of that, put it here.
Accuse you of that?
Other than that,
I did not accuse you of that.
Withdraw what he said that we were purchasing votes. Withdraw.
Thank you very much, honourable member. The member for South Eleuthera and South and Central, just restate your articulation.
I said,
and also, as you do so, Chair, a bit uncomfortable with when you use the word foolishness in terms of their opinion. The chair takes issue with the context from which you said it.
Well, I don't want to offend
just the context.
I will, because I don't wish to upset the chair, I will conform. What I said, Mr. Speaker, and I will repeat it bereft of the use of the word foolishness. What I said, Mr. Speaker, was that had members opposite incorporated the 52-week program within the aegis of the Apprenticeship Act, one would have been able to say with some degree of confidence that in fact it was a training scheme and not a scheme for buying votes. I didn't say they bought votes. Now, if they did, so be it.
Very good.
I was very, very careful.
That's very good. Thank you, Honorable Member. That's fine.
And I'm very, very careful when I speak in this place. I take responsibility for every single syllable that I utter in this place.
Cut you with the English language, boy, every time. Go ahead. So, Ludra.
You know, I don't cite poetry that I can't stick with.
Acceptance is on mine. But the words you want are poetic.
But that is how it is, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, it is difficult to justify the opinions which have been uttered on the other side about the utility of the 52-week program. It is bizarre, and it is possibly, Mr. Speaker, something I would have anticipated hearing when passing the walls of Sandland. But I leave it at that. Well, but Mr. Speaker, Central, I say these things on this side of the aisle. I wouldn't say it over there. But, Mr. Speaker, Central and South Eleuthera wholeheartedly supports this bill. I can think of no negative thing that could be said about it. Members opposite have said, and I don't know that they were serious, that when one looks at the bill, that it gives to functionaries of the Act, when it's passed, unqualified, unfettered powers to act unreasonably. Well, any lawyer, and I'm not criticizing Montague, I don't know what he says, but I'm just saying is that it is a basic presumption of construction of statute, interpretation of statute, that an act of Parliament does not give unfettered powers to anyone.
That's correct.
That is a basic rule of, I mean, that's an assumption that you can make when reading legislation. This is something that I'm surprised that experienced persons who have served in the cabinet would think that they had unfettered powers when they were empowered by legislation. Right, they knew better than that, because they would have sought advice from the Attorney General's office. And the same people who are employed there now were employed there when they were there. And they would have known. No act of Parliament gives unfettered power to do unreasonable things to anyone. And it's worse than fright. This goes back to Magna Carta.
Yes, you're right. You're right.
I mean, yes, we're talking. We belong to a civilization that has its roots thousands of years old. And especially Montague would be able to identify with that statement.
Thousands of years.
But our legal tradition makes that a heresy. And for that to even be uttered in this place is confounding. I can assure members opposite that the persons who are empowered by this act to visit premises do not have the power to do what they think they may be doing. I don't even know what they expect the inspectors to do. But how can you have a training agency set up to provide a regulatory framework for training without some officers who go out to examine what we are doing. But this is, how is it going to be done? You want to talk about transparency, and then you take away the instrument of that transparency. This is, I don't understand it, Mr. Speaker. It is just mind-boggling that it could be said with a straight face. And by a cousin of mine. Who knows better? Mr. Speaker, I commend this to the public. I think that this will have a far-reaching and transformative effect in our economy. It will make things a lot easier for business people to conduct business because they have an institution to which they may look to when they perceive that there's a shortage of labor. So you don't have to go advertising in Timbuktu to pull somebody out of a hat. Come right to the institute,
All the data is there.
the agency, and the agency will ensure that if such persons exist in our system and are available, that they're made available to the investor.
Cutting down the amount of weight for it.
I have every confidence that this will enable us to provide competent, well-trained, courteous staff to the business community, and that we will enable Bahamians to fully participate in the glorious economic resurrection which the administration of the Right Honourable Member for Central has already begun.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many.
Information.
The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Bamboo Town.
The Leader of the Opposition and the member for Kalani had asked a question concerning the sand dunes that is being constructed out west. And I just wanted to inform him that indeed what is happening is the Ministry of Works is constructing a sand dune. It is a soft barrier. Those things have been used in other parts of the world. As a matter of fact, Orange Hill is an area where we have a soft barrier, sand dune. And what we intend to do is we will cover it, and then there will be vegetation planted on it, and there's also going to be a sidewalk that's going to be put in the area. And as a result of that, if the Leader of the Opposition would like, he can see the actual drawings by the engineers in the Ministry of Works. Yes, it is. Absolutely. And it will be a way for us to protect the road.
Pause. Right Honourable Member for Centerville, would you stand? And I think it's valuable information, and please share it.
He adds to it.
The chair recognizes Right Honourable Member for Centerville.
So I do appreciate the concern evidenced by the Member of Parliament for Kalani and the Leader of the Opposition. But the intention is to have a contrast between the concrete that is further west. It's all concretized and boulders, and to have this beach coming right up to the street itself, to have a softer feel. And so when it is finished, what would happen is that the bags would be put under the sand. Trees would be planted on top of sand that will cover. Whether it's sea-grade trees or cocoa plum trees, the roots will penetrate the bags, the crocoside bags, and take hold in the bags and into the heavy sand contained. And so when the waves come, the theory is they will not be able to move as they did last time, the sand piled up there, giving a soft look. So this is really an engineering design to give a softer feel, but still be able to hold against any waves that come forward. So I think at the end of the day, all of us who live in the West will be satisfied by the softer environmentally friendly solution that we have put in place.
The chair thanks the honourable member for Bambutown and the right honourable member for Centerville for that intervention. As many. For the wrap-up, the chair recognizes the honourable member for Golden Gates.
Mr. Speaker, it really gives me pleasure to wrap up with this debate, particularly after having listened to members making their various contributions. But it would be remiss of me, Mr. Speaker, if I didn't just touch briefly on us recognizing heroes in the Bahamas before I get into my substantive wrap-up. You know, whenever certain acts take place all over the world, you try to encourage other persons to do the same thing by recognizing individuals who would carry those same acts of heroism. And Mr. Speaker, I'm gonna move shortly to create a non-profit foundation to create a Hero of the Month, recognizing all those persons who would have walked away from potentially violent situations and restrain and constrain themselves. And I thought of my hero for this month to speak, and I believe that my hero for this month is the member for Fort Charlotte. And recognizing the member for Fort Charlotte, we will name the hero of the month Dr. Andre Rollins, hero of the month, from here on in, Mr. Speaker, between now and the end of the year. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You know, Mr. Speaker, kids every day face many challenges in the schools. And you can imagine us right now creating a website where we ask individuals to identify that one student who walked away from what could potentially be a dangerous and volatile situation, just to make sure that they didn't carry a situation further than it should have gone. And so we will create that website, we will create that foundation, and we will name that person the Dr. Andre Rollins Hero of the Month. Mr. Speaker, as a matter of fact, anybody listening to this debate, Mr. Speaker, anybody listening to this debate, Mr. Speaker, and who would have interacted with Ms. Agatha Marcel on this National Training Agency would have to agree that this is the right time to introduce this agency in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. What I find particularly ironic is that the side opposite waited on hundreds of individuals to be terminated before they recognized that they had to start talking about training in the Bahamas. At that time, Mr. Speaker, BTPI had existed, and the Apprenticeship Act had existed. But they didn't say, let those two entities take care of the situation. They didn't say that. They created a temporary one-year training program for 1,000 individuals. And they thought that was fine. They didn't say, oh no, we shouldn't do this, because BTPI exists and the Apprenticeship Act exists, so we don't need to do this. They did that, Mr. Speaker. It was temporary. We are now creating a permanent solution. And you know, Mr. Speaker, the one thing I always say is I hate hypocrisy. You know, and so I'm not saying that they're hypocrites, Mr. Speaker, but I hate hypocrisy. For individuals side opposite to complain about a national training agency, Mr. Speaker, if you think about it, maybe they can help me out. Name me one agency in the Bahamas responsible for accreditation of anything. Nobody. When Success Open, all these tertiary educational institutions open, they don't give them any accreditation. They give them permission to operate. This national training agency will give accreditation to training agencies or training institutions that exist now in the Bahamas. BTVI exists, but nobody in the Bahamas accredited, given any accreditation to BTVI. They were given permission to operate. The only reason why I don't want to call other training institutions now is because we have not given them accreditation yet, and for me to mention their name, they may take it and run with it and give the impression that they're accredited. And so I'm not going to do that. But there are quite a number of training institutions in the Bahamas who will be given accreditation, who will be able to operate and provide services, not services similar to BTVI. Because when you look at, for instance, the hospitality industry, and I mentioned before about the domestic industry, Mr. Speaker. I see the member of leader opposition want to run with it now, where we're going to be accrediting all of these, where persons, when they come in the Bahamas, you need to have a certificate to operate. But first you must create the framework. When you have the proper certifications, then you can enforce it. Mr. Speaker, no, I've spoken on numerous occasions. Numerous occasions. As a matter of fact, when I was minister last time, I spoke about how I met with the some barbers and the beauty salons and the nail techs who complained that anybody could just come and open up a shop tomorrow and they can start to function with no certification. When we welcome these people in our homes to be babysitters and housekeepers, we don't know anything about them. But my position is they should go through a certification process that's recognized not only here in the Bahamas but anywhere. So I challenge the side opposite to provide me with one certificate that they gave out during their 1,000 person training program that will be recognized anywhere in the Bahamas, anywhere in the world. Provide me the certificate that's recognized. No. I believe that if they go back to that same institution and gave it to them, they probably would recognize it. You know, because that was only something that they did for expediency. They saw elections were coming and they decided, listen, elections coming, let's try to give them pressure, we're doing something, we're trying to train some people. What you see here tonight, Mr. Speaker, is real. This is no election gimmick. Election in 2017. This will be going on long after we will be off the scene. Because we don't believe in trying to buy votes and gimmicks and pretending to be trying to train individuals to take advantage of opportunities, Mr. Speaker. And so I was so happy that the member for Central and South Eleuthera was so detailed in his explanation and analysis of the difference between BTVI, the Apprenticeship Act, and this new National Training Agency Act, Mr. Speaker. Because the side opposite would try and see how they could reduce this agency to an apprenticeship board, or try to reduce the agency to just a training institute. This is no training. The agency is not a training institute. The National Training Agency, along with the Apprenticeship Board, and also BTVI, will all work in conjunction with one another. We're not duplicating any efforts. And you know, it's a good thing that Bahamians read and they look at these things. Because if you listen to the side opposite, you really think that all we were doing is replicating and duplicating the same act that was already in place. Even when they said it, Mr. Speaker, they knew it wasn't so. But they're hoping to see how they could convince those persons who would take them and plant these seeds of doubt in people's minds. Trying to see how they could deceive the people and generate excitement in their base. You know? I watched them as we spoke about this National Training Agency. I'm just speaking, you know, there's people got the gripe. You know, you can see them twitching and, you know, they're nervous and they're upset. I watched them and speak, this is a major concern for them because they know of the significant impact this will have in the Bahamas.
Transformative, man.
So, Mr. Speaker, the FLM administration put in place an unemployment benefits program, but it didn't put in place a training program concomitant with that program to that person, so that persons could be trained and retooled and thereby reduce their dependency on the government and on national insurance. Mr. Speaker, they talk about national insurance and abuse of national insurance funds. They got some nerve. I mean, they had executives paying themselves almost $1 million right under their nose. I wonder if they really didn't know about it. And they talking about abuse? Y'all didn't want me to get back into the fellow who make all the money from electrical services. And you talking about abuse of national insurance funds? Y'all got the nerve to talk about abuse? I mean, come on, man. $9.5 million for one fellow. Abuse of national insurance funds? No, I can never ever let them forget it. Yeah, and initially I thought to myself, Mr. Speaker, you know what? They really didn't know what was going on. But the more I listen to them, I'm beginning to have doubts now. That, because when you listen to them speak, Mr. Speaker, they almost seem to be endorsing this. I heard the leader of the opposition talking about how these bonuses could be justified in some cases. You could imagine a Social Security fund paying individuals bonus, and bonus of this somebody making $172,000 a year, and the bonus was 75% of that. What? 75% of $172,000. And the leader of the opposition said, he didn't say, well, it maybe could have been justified. Well, Mr. Speaker, I must admit, when he said that it was before the report came out, I don't know what you say now. That was the time when he was saying that maybe there's nothing in the report, that's why it's not out yet. So I don't know, he was quiet on some important issues recently, where he didn't take a position. I know he's not a violent man. And so when he saw violence, he said, listen, I have no position on that. He could have very easily defended it, He could say, oh, no, it didn't go. He said, I have no position on that. And so, Mr. Speaker, I believe, Mr. Speaker, that the last people in this world to be talking about abuse of national insurance funds should be the side opposite. The last people in the world. And all ain't out yet. No, we're doing another audit of some other stuff that's going on, Mr. Speaker, and wait till you see the results of that. Then you really see what is happening over there. And this one of the babies of the leaders of opposition. This one of the babies. And so when we finish that, Mr. Speaker, we'll have some more to talk about. Mr. Speaker, much has been said about the National Training Agency, supposed to be an apprenticeship program. And I wish to advise, Mr. Speaker, that I have caused a review of the three systems and the three pieces of legislation, namely the National Training Agency, the Bahamas Technical Vocational Institute, and the apprenticeship system. And the findings are that the three are distinct in their functions and their purposes. For example, Mr. Speaker, the long title of the National Training Agency bill spells out that it's a bill for an act to establish the National Training Agency and to develop a competency or skills-based training program and job placement system. For contrast, Mr. Speaker, the Apprenticeship Act makes provisions for the regulation of apprenticeship training programs, which is a lot more narrow in focus. In other words, Mr. Speaker, the National Training Agency is aimed at increasing the ability of Bahamians not just to get an education, but to participate effectively in the workforce, and at the end of the day, to improve their productivity and their employability. To this end, Mr. Speaker, the National Training Agency collaborates with institutions, businesses, and community organizations to deliver competencies and skills-based training. Note that the National Training Agency goes further and seeks to develop, implement, and promote national occupational standards based on industry standards, and the National Training Agency will approve the content of all courses to be pursued by persons desirous of obtaining vocational training, because the content has to line up City and Guilds qualification assessment and certification framework, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, with regard to the inspectors, they do not go into business community. They do not go into the business community. They go directly to our training providers to monitor trainees and the providers' activities. Mr. Speaker, like the member said for Central and Southern Lutheran, we just want accountability. That's all we want. If you say you're providing a service, we are not asking you to do this for free, We are paying you to provide a service. The agency enters into a contract with the providers. Shouldn't we be able to send inspectors to investigate, to check, to make sure what they say they're doing, that they're actually doing it, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, the NTA, the National Training Agency, contracts to providers for a fee, and therefore providers need to be held accountable for what they are providing. To reiterate, inspectors do not go to the business community. They go to providers. And while the National Training Agency will focus on training, the primary focus is on young adults who have, Mr. Speaker, in most cases, no skills. and who are challenged to find employment. The National Training Agency is not in the business of apprenticeship, but is involved in training. And as I said earlier, Mr. Speaker, the Apprenticeship Act, on the other hand, makes provisions for the regulation of apprenticeship training programs. In other words, the apprenticeship system is designed to give young persons an opportunity to work as apprentice and get training in a given trade, and upon the completion of a contract of apprenticeship, the employer, Mr. Speaker, must give the apprentice a certificate of competency and proficiency, which is presently not recognized locally or internationally. So even with the apprenticeship program now, Mr. Speaker, once they get their certificate after completing the apprenticeship program, the certificate is not recognized anywhere outside the Bahamas. Anywhere. Once we give you your certificate now from the National Training Agency, you could go anywhere in the world. The same way these people come, I said it before, from all over the world to provide services in the Bahamas. Bahamians will now be able to use that certificate and provide services anywhere in the world. Not only in the Bahamas, not only in the Caribbean, but anywhere in the world. So basically, the Apprenticeship Act regulates the apprenticeship system by providing, among other things, the apprentices must be at least 15 years old, must obtain a medical certificate, and it provides that contracts of apprenticeship must be registered with the Apprenticeship Board, which is housed in the Ministry of Education. Therefore, it limits the reach of the apprenticeship program, which, Mr. Speaker, is basically Nassau-centric. The National Training Agency is much more far-reaching than any apprenticeship program, Mr. Speaker, because it is a national program. In other words, the Apprenticeship Act only works similarly to the Employment Act, but just for apprentices, in that it governs the conditions of the relationship between the employers and the apprentice. Mr. Speaker, at the same time the Apprenticeship Act came into being, we didn't have the economic circumstances that we now have. And that's why the Apprenticeship Act came into force, to help young persons from the age of 15 and up to find a trade. The National Training Agency, Mr. Speaker, is not under any circumstances a copycat of the Apprenticeship Act. Mr. Speaker, when we look at the BTVI system, it's clear that the aim and the functions are to provide very specifically technical and vocational training, to provide for the dissemination of information to equip students with practical, technical, and vocational skills. So whereas the BTVI system focuses on construction trades, handicrafts, technology, cosmetology, etc., the National Training Agency is more broad-based and functions as an umbrella agency that coordinates training, accreditation, improving competencies, and workforce productivity on a national level. So, Mr. Speaker, just to break it down so we don't hear these same loose, unwarranted arguments again. If the members opposite could think about trade unions, and then you have an umbrella organization, right? You can't say the umbrella organization is the same as the individual trade unions. It's not the same. So for their thinking, think of BTVI as one of the trade unions, and think of the National Training Agency as an umbrella organization, responsible for all of the trade unions under its umbrella. The National Training Agency, for the last time, will not be providing training like the individual training institutions. Not be. So I don't want to hear them say that anymore, Mr. Speaker. It's not correct. And it's not the same as the Apprenticeship Act. It's not the same as BTVI. And so, Mr. Speaker, I encourage members opposite to bite the bullet and do what you know is right and vote yes for the National Training Agency. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Thank all honourable members for your contributions to this debate. I think the Bahamian people were well served by the debate today, and I would ask this House give yourselves an applause in the usual fashion. The question is that the following bill be read a second time and committed A bill for an act to establish the National Training Agency to develop a competency-based training and job placement system and for connected purposes. As many as in favor will remain seated, and those opposed will stand. Ordered that the bill be read a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to establish a national training agency to develop a competency-based training and job placement system and for connected purposes.
Further second reading of bills. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Bain and Grandstand.
Mr. Speaker, we had intended to go into negotiations tonight, but we, as I said, required more lecturing than I anticipated. And so what we are going to do is to suspend until next Wednesday, the 3rd, and we are going to proceed with second stage with the reading of the stem cell legislation, after which we are likely to go into
for both,
yes.
For both at that time.
Mr. Speaker.
Very well. The chair recognizes the member for Bain and Grandstand.
I apologize for that. What we will do is, I'll tell you what it is. So we're now going to move the suspension, and I'll suspend until Wednesday, the 3rd of July, at 10 a.m.
Thank you, honourable members. It has been moved and seconded that the business of this House suspends its sitting until Wednesday, the 3rd of July, in the year of our Lord 2013. As many as are in favor will remain seated, and those opposed will stand. Ordered that the House suspends until Wednesday, the 3rd of June at 10 a.m. 3rd of July, thank you, honourable members. Suspend Wednesday, the 3rd of July at 10 a.m.
All right.
Bill. We heard from the member for Montague, from the member from Long Island, from East Grand Bahama. Of course, we also heard from the member for Marathon, the member for Central and South Eleuthera, who took great pains to explain the difference between the Apprenticeship Act, BTVI, and what is being proposed for the National Training Agency. Of course, you also heard the Minister of Labor, the member for Golden Gates, who has the legal responsibility for the agency, explain his difference as well. As he said, and finally, he made it clear that the National Training Agency is not a school. It won't be training anyone. As he explained it, one of the easiest ways maybe to understand the National Training Agency is to imagine the trade unions, and you say the BCPOU, for example, and you think the NCTU, with the NCTU being the umbrella organization and the BCPOU being one of the trade unions. Again, the opposition saying, listen, there's no need to create another layer of bureaucracy. We've got BTVI, we've got the Apprenticeship Act. Why don't you just piggyback on what's there? And of course, government members explaining once again the function of the National Training Agency and accreditation and placement agency is what the National Training Agency is designed to do. Again, in its initial phase, looking to place 400 to 600 persons in training institutions. Could be BTVI, could be COB, could be another. Eventually, when it's up and running, really up and running under full steam, you're talking about between 2 to 2,500 persons being trained every year. Again, one of the presentations that everybody's been talking about here in Parliament is that of the member for Seabreeze, and been described as spirited and impassioned. Hope Strachan expressing incredulity that the members of the opposition Free National Movement would have some objection to what the government is doing with the National Training Agency. In fact, the same sentiment expressed by the member from Central and South Eleuthera. All in all, the debate completed. Members will, again as we heard, return on the 3rd of July when they could also address the stem cell research bill that is presently before Parliament as well. Again, debate on the National Training Agency, that agency, umbrella agency, concerned with the training of Bahamians to prepare them for, as again Hope Strachan says, the many jobs that will come, and not only train them but place many of them as well. The debate now is over. They return on the 3rd of July, which is next Wednesday, when they will complete the process and prepare for going on to the Senate. And so on behalf of the team here at the Parliamentary Channel, that's it. I'm Anthony Newbold. We expect to see you back here next Wednesday, July 3rd at 10 a.m. in the morning. Good night.